Hello and welcome everyone to the Q&A session for the upcoming course, Practical Animism, the journey to reclaim kinship through earth-honoring ritual. I'm Ann Patricia with the Shift Network, and I'm so happy to be with you this evening to host this Q&A, where we'll explore the teachings of Daniel Foor and address questions about his upcoming course, Practical Animism. The pre-course begins March 25th, and the full course begins May 13th. We'll be telling you more about how this works in just a bit, and I'll also be explaining how you can participate in this course even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest. Daniel Foor is a teacher and practitioner of practical animism who specializes in ancestral and family healing and in helping people learn to relate well with the rest of the natural world. His focus on ancestors flows from his training as a doctor of psychology, from the guidance of his teachers in earth-honoring traditions, and from 2 decades of implementing the teachings of ancestor reverence in his own life. He's the author of Ancestral Medicine, Rituals for Personal and Family Healing. In just a few moments, we'll be opening to your questions, but first, I want to welcome Daniel, who will begin by leading us in an opening prayer and saying a few words about this upcoming course. Welcome, Daniel. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's good to be here. And yeah, I'm happy to offer a few words of prayer. Folks may notice I'm initially praying in a language other than English, and that would be Yoruba. I happen to be an initiate in West African Isha tradition, so that's a source of nourishment and inspiration for me. Ekale abroboye abono risha abono rimale abono lale awon egun onile boduara ile ogere afakoyeri jobo wani bi ramelo walati mobi ashen sofona wanani ani bi ambian judada lati ranti awon ipimwa lati mobi ashen toju onile dada Monsoro iba amo agba lagba mi adu falu adasanya bogya de ti bogbo agba lagba wona ti ia ifabume ti bogbo agba lagba won chuo wani bi ramelowo lati sofona woni any ami bi dada eshepupo. Thank you to the good powers that hold up my life and hold up the lives of everybody listening. Just help this time to be connective and kind and respectful to the spirits and to the nature of the work, and help the people who are going to benefit from this offering to find it and to come on in a good way. Thanks. Ashe.
Thanks so much, Daniel. So we have the rest of this time together to explore questions for Daniel as we prepare for his upcoming course, Practical Animism. And the course begins May 13th, and we have some pre-course content that starts March the 25th. If you'd like to check out the website, it'd be a good idea. All the details are there, and you can learn more about his course. So please visit practicalanimsmcourse.com. I'll say that again. practicalanimsmcourse.com. You'll see a full description and all the details. So let's get started with the questions. I have some here off our webcast. And if you're joining us, you can type a question into the chat, and we'll be happy to read them out to Daniel as well. So this is from Ilsa. She says, hello, Daniel. I'm wondering how much of the course will be experiential. I find the philosophy and teachings of animism fascinating, but I'm hoping the course will also provide tangible practices that I can use to make it a lived experience in my life. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It is experiential. In each of the 14 lessons, and also for those who enter the course through the Pathway of the Shift Network, each of the 2 pre-course lessons and meetups in March and in April, so 14 or 16, either way, each of them will have an experiential component where I'm guiding folks through a thing. In the 14 main lessons that are part of the core course that everyone's going to be with, because this course, remember, it's a collaboration through Shift and through my own practice. So folks who register through Shift will end up by May 13th integrated with others who are coming directly through my own practice into one great course together. And the way that's set up is that the lessons are pre-recorded for about a half an hour or so each. And within each of those, there's an experiential practice for sure. So absolutely about it being experiential. And then after each of those 30-minute or so lessons, that week or occasionally the week after, so we space it out a little bit, there's a live meetup for an hour 15. And the first 45 minutes of that are me just answering your questions and being available for whatever is alive for folks. And then the last half hour of each of those 14 live conferences will be small group breakouts. And we have 20, 25 awesome people, most of whom I've trained, all of whom I know to be people of high integrity, of diverse backgrounds, who are going to be supporting the course and resourcing things and guiding those small group breakouts and helping with the Facebook chat and all that. So it's the nature of the work to really get it is embodied and experiential. And the approach is a core values-based approach. So we're coming a little bit at a psychological angle, but I'm also a ritualist. It's also rooted in awareness of world traditions in a respectful way. And so the intellectual learning is also honored, is what I'd say. And the core values piece is just that I'm not dictating the actual form or the style of the ritual. So people who have an established practice within a tradition, you can use the ritual forms that speak to you. And for people that don't have any kind of established tradition and no ritual forms to fall back on, there will be some basic suggestions as well. But I like to keep it ritually accessible and not too fancy and high-tech so that it's compatible across traditions. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Melee is asking, how can I practice these communications with other sentient beings outdoors in my suburban neighborhood yard without feeling embarrassed or self-conscious? Is there a way to bring the neighbors along if they are judging or fearful of the ritual?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. It's a layered question. For one, on just a psychological level, pushing through some of the shame and contraction that might arise at other people observing you enacting spiritual practice or ritual is a fruitful kind of exercise to be doing ritual in public, if it's good for you, you know. I think it's a good edge to practice working, though. Beyond that, it's good to notice where the roots of that contraction or fear come from. They're rooted in racism and colonialism, in the highly destructive genocidal empire that has dramatically impacted the indigenous cultures of the Americas, of Africa, of other places, outside of Europe, speaking at this point to the spread of European colonialism. And it's a mindset that destructively severs people from a natural instinct to be in relationship with the wider other than human communities that we're embedded in. The plant people, the stone people, animal people, etc., ancestors. And so it's possible, if it lands well for any given person, that the choice to be witnessed by others, claiming your space, to make a prayer, to make an offering, something like that, is also a kind of cultural, political, restorative act and a modest gesture of decolonizing. Additionally, you don't actually need to be outside. It's great if you can be outside, but some people are not able to do that physically for all kinds of reasons or logistically, whatever it is. And so the idea that there's nature and not nature is problematic, and we're going to get into that in the course. So we work with the spirits of the plants and animals that we're eating, with the metals and tree bones and synthetic creatures that our homes are made of. We give respect to the hundreds of millions of microorganisms that are in on the conversation right now, and that there's not anywhere outside of nature. So that's important to work at that split and soften that split as well. So you don't have to weird out the neighbors on purpose because their fear is a colonialist legacy, but you can if you want to.
Thank you so much, Danielle. That was a multi-layered answer, so thank you for that. Polly is asking, how do you present your info when speaking to children or adults who have never studied ancient wisdoms? So this tied in a little bit to what you said, but I think it might go a little deeper.
Yeah, well, if you embody it personally and you have those ethics and the children just watch you enact relational values with the other than human world, then they'll naturally pick it up. It's what you do. And when I'm in Nigeria, for example, the kids grow up around ritual, generally, at least the families who are traditionalists. And so it's quite normal. If somebody sees you praying, they're like, they don't interrupt you, or if you're making offerings, no big deal. And so just letting it be a normal everyday activity helps to create a space or permission for younger people to participate. I'm very respectful of tradition, but have an aversion to dogma or rigidity. And so I think making relational attitudes toward life really normal and really down to earth and really not, they don't need to be a ritual. And they can just be as ritualized as this conversation is now. And so let it be normal, natural, and in the open. And if you can, be around other families, other kids who have similar values. And teach, you can use the ethics that are important between living humans as a reference point for how to extend those ethics from living humans to other than humans. And we'll get into that in the course, but that's basic animist psychology, is how to recognize that the dynamics with the other than humans are complex also. And to teach the kids about that and how just being respectful isn't always straightforward, it's complicated.
Polly is asking, I'm sorry, that was Polly. Thank you so much for that. Francesca is asking, I have long felt that things created by human beings have a sense of their purpose and do not feel fulfilled unless they are able to exercise that purpose. In other words, something that is either unused or misused feels loss and grief. Do you find this so?
I do. I think that the category of so-called objects is a really problematic one, actually. And I tend to see so-called things that humans make as children of the humans and the elemental powers. And right now, this conversation is enabled by the burning of coal here in North Carolina, or the mining of the wires for the internet technology, and there's all different kinds of resources. The elemental powers have been moved from their setting and shaped by humans in a way that hopefully is worthwhile in this moment if we show up well. But I do think when we shape a thing, there's a kind of responsibility that is entailed in that. And that objects, so-called objects, have their own sorrow and their own completion at being related with and appreciated as such. It's a strange and nuanced topic, but yeah, definitely.
So I'm going to pull a question here from Janet. She says, do elemental spirits, or Isha, work with ancestor spirits, and how? What are the differences in how we honor each?
Well, that's a big couple of questions. But for folks who don't know, the Orisha it's a Yoruba word, Yoruba people being in southwest Nigeria, so West Africa, and Yoruba tradition through the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade spread through the resilience of Yoruba and other related nearby peoples who were enslaved and kept their traditions alive nonetheless. And so it's meant that some of the understandings have evolved in the Americas, in places like Cuba and Brazil, etc. And the traditions are still quite intact and robust in West Africa as well. And so my own lineage of influence is more from West African Orisha tradition. Having said that, the deities, the elementals, the personification of nature, who are the deities, are composed in part of human ancestors. As an initiate of Oshun, for example, who's a goddess of the Oshun River and water and love and beauty and witchery and many other things, her body, what is Oshun, is partly composed of human ancestral priests of Oshun and living devotees of her, as well as water and brass and other than human things, animals, plants, etc. So there is a lesson in the course where we get into what deities are made of and how to look cross-culturally at the demographic of others that are the gods, the goddesses, the deities, the powers. Not all traditions relate with the rest of life through that lens, but many do, and it's one that speaks to me personally, so we'll talk about it. And so yes, the human ancestors and the deities are very woven together strongly. They can be experienced on their own terms or together. And there's an intimate relationship there. In Cuban lineages, in Lucumí, some will say that the ancestors give birth to the Orisha, which is a reversal of the usual story. So there are a lot of mysteries involved in this topic. So, yeah, respect.
Thank you, Daniel. What is the relationship of animism to colonialism and histories of oppression?
Yeah, that's a big question. But briefly speaking, everyone on the call, even if you're a American whitey McWhite person like myself, who's of English, German, Irish, early colonialist settler ancestry to North America, even if that's the case, meaning that your own ancestors of blood didn't have a culturally coherent, intact kind of animism or relational value set so openly practiced for probably over 1,000 years. If you dial it back much further than that, our people, all of our people, generally speaking, have a habit of recognizing that there are other kinds of people and powers besides just living humans. This includes the so-called natural world, the ones we think of as animals and plants and rivers and weather, but also the unseen or usually unseen powers. And so those frameworks are still intact in many parts of the world. Not always, but especially often among indigenous peoples. And most indigenous peoples have experienced profound pressure and interference from colonialism and from empire and from folks who would come and occupy aggressively the space of indigenous people. And so it's especially important for folks who are not indigenous, like myself, to reclaim a similar value set of relationality, of etiquette, of consent, of appreciation for how we got into the mess that we're in and how Europe got off track culturally in many ways around good values and etiquette and respect for the earth and the land, and then exported that toxicity through the transatlantic slave trade, through the genocidal occupation of the Americas, and through interference in major problematic ways in Africa, Asia, etc. And so it's not that European ancestral people have any kind of monopoly on bad behavior or colonialism per se, but European colonialism has had a particularly harmful impact on intact animist or indigenous traditions around the world. So that's important to keep in mind, and to keep in mind in how we approach and learn from intact traditions, to make sure that that learning is reciprocal, that it's with permission, that it doesn't unintentionally replicate those histories of harm. And all the same, like European ancestor people, like everybody else, needs to need to get on board with core relational values, from the personal sphere to the family sphere to the legal political sphere, if we're to slow down the ecological collapse that we're generating. So that's a brief answer. There's a lot that could be said there, but real simplistically, colonialism has wrecked a lot of beautiful things and is still ongoing. And simultaneously, earth-honoring traditions have a lot of resilience and a lot of relevance.
Thank you so much. Does someone need to have a certain level of understanding or experience in this topic before participating, or in order to receive the most benefit from this course?
No. That's the short answer. You really don't. And I include in the way I teach it, and remember the bulk of the course starting in May is through my own practice. And I mean, both ways are great. And one way it differs some from the usual format with Shift, if you've done a Shift course, is that we include a lot of additional readings and resources and articles and things like that with the course. And so folks who wish to also complement the experiential work with intellectual inquiry and learning about different cultures and how the principles show up in different cultures will feel well met by that aspect of the course. And I enjoy teaching to folks who are totally new to things, because we all have experiences of relatedness and connectedness with the rest of life, but we don't necessarily have a container for how to think about that and talk about that. So I'm happy to welcome folks who don't have some spiritual identity or formal background or thing like that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Daniel. So given that you are a doctor of psychology, can you speak on the relationship of animism to psychology and psychotherapy?
Yeah, that's another big question. It's a focus of the second book when I find time to write it. And the short answer, I suppose, and this will be woven in through the course a bit, it's in part a psychological angle, in part. Western psychology, which I respect, I'm a therapist, I'm in therapy, it's good, and therapy tends to focus on the experience of living humans and maybe the relationship of living humans to other living humans. Now, there are exceptions, but for the most part, it's focused there. That's sacred and very important, and often, but not always, can be insensitive just in the human sphere to issues around class, gender, race, international differences, and things like that. Additionally, psychotherapy, psychology tends to undervalue or even delegitimize the importance of intimacy between humans and the others, the land, the animals, plants, and not only companion animals, respect to pets and all that, but I mean our connection to the earth and the wider field of relations who die daily so we can eat, for example. These relationships don't get as much attention in the field of psychology. And that's super problematic in all kinds of ways. But one of the ways it's problematic is we overlook, meaning mainstream psychology, a source of profound relational intimacy and nourishment and joy and learning that can be had if we bring more conscious our connection to the trees and the bears and the butterflies. And so psychology misses out a lot of times on those things. Psychology unconsciously replicates a white supremacist, colonialist, patriarchal value set by only focusing on the individual and the relationship of those individuals with other individuals. So that sucks because we're in a mess culturally, and it would be good to uproot some of that. And some therapists are doing awesome work. And so I don't mean to generalize too much, but what's awesome about the blend of what's good from psychology and animist values is that a lot of the wisdom that comes from good therapy and being emotionally worked through grown-up can set a person up to navigate really well the relationships with the other than humans. And so a lot of the same kinds of etiquette and boundary, consent-minded things and bringing love and humility, all that applies when we want to come back into relationship with the land as well. So we're going to bring our baggage to these other relationships as well. And that's an opportunity, and it's we can't escape ourselves.
Since so many people have companion animals, Daniel, can you speak a little bit to just even the beginning levels of creating a deeper relationship with those animals that we have in our lives on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Just making the space to drop in and listen to them and speak to them like the intelligent and complex creatures that they are is great. And to think in pictures more than words, and to show them what we mean through actions and mental pictures more so than language only. So they're great teachers about not having our communication only be boxed in by language. And to remember that not so different than humans, but like a lot of animals and especially plants, at any given moment, your specific cat can become cat with a capital C. There's a way that a bigger collective intelligence can come through the form of the individual. And to know that that's not always going to be the case, though, that window of openness will wax and wane, but to allow that there can actually be big encounters that occur through not just the companion animals, but the companion plants, the stones in our neighborhood, the beings that are near to us have their song and their intelligence that we so often overlook. And that seeing the sacred in what is close by and what is often overlooked will be a big part of the course. The practices are place-oriented and encourage people to see the holiness and the specific medicine of the place where they're inhabiting in the present.
That's great. Now, is animism like a religion or a spirituality or like a belief system?
Yeah, I don't actually see it as any of those things, so it's good that the question comes through. The way I hold this work is more in the realm of core values. And animism, and I'm drawing partly on the excellent work of Graham Harvey here. He has a book on animism, which I recommend. There'll be some readings on that in the course. And the way he frames it, I think, is congruent with a lot of indigenous systems, but also other than indigenous folks, is that living human people are just one kind of person in a much wider community of people, some of whom are human, like the ancestors, some of whom are not human at all. And in these relationships, it's incumbent upon us to seek to be a respectful person. And knowing how to be respectful relative to the stones and the nearby river is different than how to be respectful to the red-tailed hawk or to our companion cat here. And so it requires learning different kinds of etiquette. And there are recurrent values around respect for the space of others, around gratitude for what sustains us in terms of food and structure and medicine. So recognition of the killing that is required to eat. And I'm including plants in that. I think all of the listeners eat. And so if you eat, then you kill. And if you kill, there's a question of whether or not you do it consciously with gratitude or not so much. And so there's an invitation from an animist value set to be more conscious of our interrelatedness, to allow our sense of self to be kind more consciously embedded. It's not like you get to opt out of your embeddedness if you don't like animism or something, but to bring conscious our dependence and our embeddedness in all these other relationships. And so that can function as one's foundation from which to have a sense of spirituality. And many spiritual systems, or even religions, if you will, could be described as being quite animist in their value set. But at the heart of it, I see it being about core values, and more so than about belief or what do you believe. It's more so like, what do you do? What are your values? So I'm ambivalent about religion or spirituality. I actually think spirituality is kind of a harmful concept for the most part. And it creates an artificial split between everyday life and a sense of personal interior spiritual identity, when spirituality ideally informs our everyday actions, which are inherently political, have consequences. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. So we are here with Daniel Foor and learning about his upcoming course, Practical Animism. The pre-course begins on March the 25th, and we'd love for you to check out the website and learn more and register at practicalanimsmcourse.com, practicalanimsmcourse.com. So here's another question. How do we begin to connect and incorporate the earth elements, such as mountains, powerful stones, into practices that draw us into their wisdom?
Well, there's a whole lesson on that in the course, but you just approach, for one. I mean, there's more that could be said, but the first layer of how do we incorporate a specific kind of wisdom is we approach those beings with humility, with an awareness of the power differential that those ones are elder to us in many ways. And we listen. We're like, help me to know what the etiquette is for how to approach you. You might find a place local to you, and you come and you bring offerings. And you introduce yourself and your ancestors and say that it's your intent to just listen and to learn and to be taught. If you come at it like that, things tend to open up. It's also possible to recognize the teeth and bone and very earth-dense elemental layer of the physical body, and to recognize the amount of elemental earth and density around you in your home and your dwelling place right now, and start to distinguish the differences between metals and stone or rock or soil or the plants. And so there are many different qualities that could exist in this elemental earth designation. And to start to activate some of those qualities internally is one way to deepen that relationship. So it's not just one pathway in, but those are a few prompts. And in general, the important thing is to come with good etiquette up front, because it'll encourage the spirits of the stones and the mountains to be more receptive to you if they trust you, and then to be tenacious about it. I spent years actually living in the San Francisco Bay Area and came to really know some of the mountain spirits there, and they're lovely and powerful, and they take a minute to cultivate relationship with. But it can be done, yeah.
Thank you. So what's unique or different? What can you tell us about your teaching style and your approach to this work relative to what others in this field might be sharing?
Yeah, sure. For one, I abhor spiritual jargon and all that. So I know that in this format, I might be speaking very deliberately and like that, but whether or not it's obvious, I actually have a sense of humor, and I'm sarcastic, and we have a good time with the course. We laugh, we have a good time with it in the live conferences. So that's one thing. And so it's down to earth in that way. And Another thing is that the course is resourced by 20, 25 awesome supporters. And so even if you like the content and you don't like me that much, you should be fine, because there's going to be other people you can connect with and get some direct support from. So that's a great feature of the course. And those people are really awesome ritualists with their own practice and their own right. And so it's a blessing to have them with us. Another is that I'm an intellectual also. I'm an initiate in several West African priesthoods. I've been steeped in ritual for a long time. I like the intensity. I'm a ritualist, I'm a priest, and I'm an intellectual, both. And so it's not going to be like this mush-brained, like totally making stuff up approach. I'm respectful of history and of not saying stuff that I don't know or I don't understand. So intellectual and spiritual, that's an aspect of how I teach. And the work will be rooted in an anti-oppression ethic, not in a way that's super politicized or rigid or things that can be, for me at least, off-putting about some aspects of American social justice movement. But what's awesome about all that, which is most of it, will be informing how we approach the course. Meaning, I want it to be not just good enough, but explicitly welcoming and awesome for people of color, for indigenous folks, for queer, trans, gender nonconforming folks, for folks without much money, for folks who really don't care about the whole I'm very spiritual, subculture, whatever. So we end up with a diverse crew of people. And remember, some folks are coming just through my own practice, so there is going to be a lot of the folks who are usually coming through the shift pathway, and then also the blending. So there's a bit of a blend of those two different demographics of people. So, and it's internationally sensible. Even though I'm American, I've lived in other countries, and I savor the opportunity to teach to an international group. And I'm teaching in 7 different countries this year myself, and it's going to be international in scope. So that's great.
I'd like to have you speak.
The last thing, go ahead. And I'll finish my thought with it, is that me and our team were really responsive to folks and have a strong ethic that we don't want to let people fall through the cracks. So we have a real ethic of ritual customer service in that way. We actually care about the people in the course in a human way and are interested in those relationships. So, yeah.
So I'd love to hear you speak more about the international piece of this, the international flavor. And can you speak more about the Orisha tradition and tell us a bit about what it's like for you to have been a practitioner for West African Orisha tradition over the past decade or so?
Yeah. Well, I got introduced to Yoruba traditions in the diaspora in the late 90s, and then got more involved in a focused way in 2006. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, stepped into initiations to different priesthoods. And it's important to know that the course isn't focused on that per se. It's one important influence for me. So I mention it at times and use that as an example to illustrate certain points. And if folks have that background, of course, we can talk shop if needed. But for me, it's been really nourishing and corrective and helpful to be part of an established lineage and tradition of practice that's welcoming to non-Yoruba people. And to see when I'm in Nigeria, I've been just 4 times, but I'm a student of the language and the culture, and so we've hosted our teachers here as well. And just to have adults who are older than me model touching their head to the ground, worshiping the earth, feeding the ancestors, making offerings at rivers and places in the natural world, and feeding the spirits. It's really good. It's really helpful to me, and it has been a source of good grief, of melting in from my heart some of the layers of cultural loneliness and pain and non-belonging that drove me in a healthy way to search about all this stuff earlier in life. So there's been a quality of homecoming in it, and the cultural bridge to be hanging out with Yoruba people and to be, really knowing them as family is, it's lovely. It's a source of sweetness for me and my family. Yeah.
Well, we do have time for a few more questions, but before we go into those, I just wanted to take a few minutes to go over the details about practical animism. So this is going to be a really practical, powerful journey under Daniel's care and guidance, as you can tell by hearing him speak. You'll be discovering powerful practices and a down-to-earth framework for navigating your relationships with Earth and the rest of life. Courses will start on May 13th, but there's a wonderful pre-course content which begins March 25th. And for any reason, if you can't join live, you won't miss the teachings. We've set it up in a way that you receive audio, video, replays, and transcripts and course handouts available to you. And I also want to remind you that there is a no-risk money-back guarantee on our courses. So until June 6th, you have to make a decision as to whether this course is a fit for you. So that's giving you all the way well into the course actually starts. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect via a private Facebook community group. That'll keep you connected to one another as you connect about the work and speak about the experiences you're having. And as Daniel shared, there are these 25 awesome trained ritualists that are supporting the course and breakout group. And these people that have been trained by Daniel and supporting the course and supporting your journey is really unparalleled in terms of accessing the materials and making it your own. We have a Practical Animism bonus collection, and it includes revisioning relationships with our plant kin. This is a video conversation with Daniel and Rachel Wheats. There's also healing attachment wounds with ancestral reconnection. This is a video interview with Daniel and Saskia Isam. I'm going to have you say that name for me, Daniel. Can you say that name so I don't do it an injustice?
It's Rachel White, Saskia Isan, and Siobhan Watkins, probably. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. The third one is Microanimism, celebrating our relationships with the smalls, and that's a video conversation again with Daniel. And we also have a very special bonus for anyone that's motivated and knows they really want to jump in. By March 14th, that's midnight Pacific, March the 14th, there's a special bonus called Deepening Your Relationships with Wise and Loving Ancestors, Ancestral Medicine 4-session immersion. That's 4-session video training from Daniel. So, Daniel, is there anything about those bonuses that you could share with our listeners today before we go into some more questions?
Sure. They're all good conversations with the interviews, some of which include material that's genuinely not in the course. And the 4-series session that Anne mentioned at the end there, each of those sessions are an hour and a half, and they get into some really interesting terrain about ancestral healing. And so we just did that as a smaller course unto itself. So it's a substantial bonus to add. And that we learn through conversation a lot of times. And the interviews that are being shared are, they're with people I know and trust. So a lot of good things came out through that.
Great. Over in Module 4, Daniel, I'd love to have you share a little bit about the module focused on boundaries. I think we all understand how important boundaries are human to human, but what you're inferring here is a sacred space and learning to honor sacred space also in the non-human. So please share a bit about that.
Yeah, generally speaking, most people are raised in a culture that's actually terrible about boundaries. The amount of sexual assault and harassment and sexualized violence that continues is extreme. The lack of safety for people of color, for poor people, for so many different kinds of people who experience on the daily fear and upset in their nervous system and in their, tangible life because others have bad boundaries, or they might get shot when they get pulled over or something like that. This kind of spirit of boundary violation, of lack of consent, of lack of mindfulness, if we don't get to the roots of it within ourselves, we're going to bring that into how we would approach the other than human relationships. And we're going to bring the same kind of conquistador taking spirit into those other relationships. And so slowing down and understanding how to really hear and accept no from the others. How to find something really shiny feather or bone or something interesting, a really beautiful stone, and to reach down and to hear the little voice that says, that's not for you. Don't take it. It's not yours. You can't have it. And to back up and respect that. And to see that when we can hear no, then we're going to deepen in our intimacy with the rest of life. And also we need to be able to extend no, and to know when the spirits are like, you need to do this initiation, or you should go sit overnight on the mountain, and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's okay to decline what any given power other than human people say of you. So knowing how to give a no, how to receive a no, makes the yes more sound and trustworthy and legitimate. So we'll talk about how a real wholesome ethic and sensibility around consent and boundaries is important for relating with all kinds of people. And the other than humans can be great teachers about that. So we'll talk about things like danger and poison and poison ivy and oak and things that will teach you about boundaries in a good way.
That's great. Patricia says, I am an animist at heart. It is living human people I have problems with. I am tired of dealing with these things alone. How can I get help from my nature people and spiritual ancestors to speak to a problem that has overwhelmed me for almost a year with no resolution in sight? I've been asking my blood lineage ancestors to help as well during the course we just completed.
It's hard to know how to generalize in a way that would meet the specific circumstance of the person asking. And so I would say in general, if you haven't done it, to try to find a way to drop into an individualized session space with a practitioner that you trust. But to speak to it in a general way, it's good to work in spirit, at least to a degree, with the team approach, so that your wise and loving human ancestors are harmonized, or at least able to share the same psychic space as your connection with the dolphins and the hawthorn tree and the stream near your house and this or that Egyptian deity. So there's a sense, even though you respect the difference of those ones, that you can assemble a council and be like, I got a problem. I need something from you all. I'm taking care of the relationship. We're in this ongoing connection, and right now I'm struggling. What steps do I need to take to try to remedy this situation? What's going to shake up the energy? And their answer might be like, yeah, it's tough. Just let you sit with it. Sometimes they're like that. They're like, you're going to learn some stuff. You'd be like, come on, help me out. They're like, they're not going to give you much. So sometimes that is the remedy, is to let you struggle through a thing. And other times they'll speak to a very specific kind of remedy. So go with the team approach, and you can ask who of the ones that I'm already in relationship might have the remedy that I need here, because it's sometimes a case of going to the specialized kind of power that has the remedy that you need. But that's a general thing. And of course, always to weave in the question, What am I being invited to learn? What's my own part in this? What's the growth opportunity?
I thought that was very specific advice, Daniel. Thank you. Forrest would like some comment on, as a student of shamanism and animism and alternative paths of spiritualism, and fundamental curiosity arises, is the primordial intelligence that permeates all that exists influenced by the character of human behavior to the extent that our efficacy when making connection with the field is largely dependent upon repeating previously established ritual pathways? Daniel, can you speak on this related to ritual and tradition, just to help Forrest out?
Yeah, kind of would be the answer. Established forms can be really powerful. They're the accretion or the continuation, the inheritance of ancestral experiments in ritual and in hashing out, what works, what doesn't work. So when you receive an inherited ritual from tradition, it's been field tested typically, often for centuries. And that's beautiful. You commune with the ancestors, and there is a potency to a real winning formula when you inherit that and have permission to hold that tradition. Having said that, the spirits, the powers, the field is responsive to new form as well. And so all traditions began at a certain point. None of them are pre-existing exactly, although they might be downloaded from some strange spirit interdimensional place. And I think around this question, my strategy is to teach people core values and how they show up in ritual space. And if we are holding really strong core values and we embody those values, we'll be able to inhabit them through established traditions, or we'll be able to inhabit those core values when we're improvising and receiving new forms and doing the creative, freeing, and also lonely work of hashing out new possible rituals. So that what's common between those two strategies is the underlying ethics and values, and that we're coming from a spirit of love, curiosity, listening, humility. So if we're listening closely, we'll have a good sense for what works and what doesn't work. So that listening and receptivity is key, especially when coming up with new ritual forms.
We have a couple of questions related to plant kingdom. So one says, how do I discern between a real contact with the spirit of a plant or other nature element and my own mental chatter? Yeah, that's a question that is not limited to plants. If you're on a date with someone and you think it went really well and you get a text that they're like, yeah, no thanks. How do you trust that your read on the situation was accurate? How do you know in any relationship that you're actually making contact in a good way? Some of those questions about how do I tell the difference between really being in contact and just making stuff up, some of those apply in lots of different domains. And one of the a few general answers is one, we need to work, the more we work through our own unhealed, unresolved emotional stuff that we're walking around with, we're going to be more available in the moment, less clouded by our own projection, and more able to be in objective, healthy relationships. We'll know the difference the more clear we are. So that's one thing. Keep working your own stuff. Another is just practice. And the more we work at it with a kind of relationship that's like listening to the rosemary or speaking to the plants that you're cooking with, those habits of relationship take time and practice. And even if you're in the habit of relating with living humans, let's say, you're still going to get it wrong sometimes. Be like, wow, I misjudged that person.
they seem really nice, but turned out, not so much. And so it's okay to mess it up a little. Another is, or to misread a situation. That happens no matter what, even if you have a lot of experience. So working out our stuff, practicing, and then recognizing there's a cultural unlearning or maybe relearning piece about how to navigate these other kinds of relationships and to see them as normal. And to take the voice that it's like, you're a superstitious, lesser person for doing this. That like internalized racism and colonialism that would sit on our shoulder and judge us for talking to the plants, to bring that one conscious and be like, oh yeah? How so? Tell me more. Where did you learn that? Where did you get the story that you're going to get in trouble if you do this? Or it's not scientific, it's not mature, it's just what confused people do. Let's unpackage that. So there's a need to do some cultural unlearning as well, or else those voices will interfere with our natural and easeful relationship with the plants, for example. Yeah. And to bring a sense of levity and fun to it, that matters too.
That's great. That actually answered the last question we have over here, so I don't need to bring that one forward. I would love to hear, Daniel, just what's calling you forward the most in offering this next course?
Yeah, we're living in a catastrophe. The amount of hemorrhaging of biological diversity is extreme, and it's because of human stupidity and greed and poor choices. So we're living in a self-generated catastrophe that's going to continue for at least a century. And it's tough to know what to do about that. So it's easy to shut down. It's easy to kind of freak out and just post a lot on Facebook, or just go about your life and be like, I don't know what to do. It's too much. And we're going to make space in the course for grieving. I will have a good time too, but it's not possible to have your heart open and not also realize the disaster that we're making, and the amount of it's important to take all that in to your heart, and to make your heart the shape of the earth, and to just feel it and let yourself be kind of wrecked by it a bit. Because the other than humans, will trust you a little more. Be like, oh, you're not totally a ghost. You seem to feel. Okay, maybe you're different than the other humans. So we'll learn together how to be heart-aware people who are trying to live well with the rest of life. And that's urgently, urgently important. So the work is inherently political. It's cultural change work. I don't care if it's spiritual. It's an annoying category, but it's rooted in love and consideration for others. And so if folks feel drawn to that, come be with us. If the money's an obstacle, work it out. Like you can, lean on Shift for what is possible there. You can search out the course through my site. It's the same course, a little bit like extra stuff through Shift. It's fine. Both are good. There's a good collaboration happening with Shift. So if you're moved to be with us, come do it. It's a good space. We'll have a good time.
Well said. I want to thank everyone, all of our viewers, for being with us, and to those of you that posted your wonderful questions, thank you so much. And thank you, Daniel, for all that you brought, as you always do, so many teachings for us. Practical Animism course, the pre-course, begins March the 25th, and we'd love to have you join us. And remember, there is a special bonus called Deepening Your Relationship with Wise and Loving Ancestors, Ancestral Medicine, the 4 full session immersion that you receive if you register by midnight Pacific, March the 14th. That's a 4-session video training with Daniel, so it's like a complete course that you get in addition. It's a wonderful wonderful bonus if you know you want to step in with us right away. And to learn more about this course, to read through each of the modules, and to register, please go to practicalanimismcourse.com, and you'll see everything there, practicalanimismcourse.com. So Daniel, I'll pass it over to you for your final words to our listeners tonight.
Just give thanks for the powers that support us, that even if you're suffering or having a hard time, that there are hundreds and many beyond that beings who are rooting for us, who want us to show up well and to be loving and kind and accountable. And that these kinds of values that we're talking about are learnable. And I want to affirm the intelligence and the ability to learn that the listeners have. And that if you want to enjoy more intimacy with the earth and the spirits, that this is one of many ways, but that it's doable to feel, to believe in yourself and your ability to learn and to come back into relationship, no matter what your background, your ancestry, your age, any of that. So that's what I have in this moment is act on the motivation if you have it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Anne. Great.
Once again, thanks everyone who posted questions today and joined us. And on behalf of everyone here at the Shift Network, we wish you well, and we look forward to having you on this course or on one in the future. Be well.